Hello and welcome back to episode number 10 of my Fortnite tutorial series. Today we will deal with the actual placement of buildings in our world, so let's dive right into it. Taking another look at our example Fortnite, you will see that constructions have their own health bar that slowly builds up over the building time, and there is a visual effect, which is that the color of the health bar is either orange or green based on whether the building process is currently going on or already completed. So let's create that health bar first, but before that let's go to Blueprints, Enums, right click and add a new enumeration, e_building state. And like I said, there are two different states. Either the construction is being built right now, so that we will call that building, or we finish building and then we'll just call that state build. Save and close your enumeration. Then we'll head over to the widgets, user interface, widget blueprint. Let's call that w_building health bar. Then open it up, make it desired on screen and remove the canvas panel. We will add a size box. Then on top of that add an overlay. Let's select the size box and hit width and height override. We will use a size of 360 pixel in width by 32 in height. Then in our overlay we will start with the progress bar, actually displaying our health percentage. Make that fill. For the background image, look for bar fill. We'll draw that as an image. Then let's copy what we entered here, paste that for the fill image. And then for the background, we'll make that black with an alpha of 0.5. Okay. If we then set the percent to something, you can see that filling up. Let's call that the health bar. On top of that, we also want to display the actual values in text. So add that onto your overlay and let's call that the health text. Make it a variable. As a default, we can enter something like 50, add a white space. Then we will add a separator. You can get that by holding Ctrl, Alt and then hitting the greater or less key on your keyboard. And add another white space and type in 200. Font will be our Burbank bold font with a size of 21. Then we'll go to the shadow color and make that semi-transparent, so 0.5. And maybe also increase the shadow. So shadow offset, set that to 1.5 for X and Y. Then we will align that to the center vertically and give that a little bit of padding. Say 15 pixels to the left and 2 to the top. Alright, that's looking good. Let's compile, save. That's it for designing your widget. Head over to the graph and let's add a couple of variables. So first off, this widget needs to know about the state to change the color of the bar based upon that. The type for that will be e_building state. Then we need to know about the current health, which will be an integer. And finally the maximum health, or just max health, which will also be an integer. Then we will add a function that will update the current health value and also the display in our widget. So add a function, update health, give that one input of type integer, which we will call new value. After that, set your current health, and we could just plug in that new value, but let's clamp that before to make sure it is somewhere in the range of 0 to our maximum health. Then plug it in and we have to update our health bar. So grab that, set percent. We already coded that behavior multiple times. Get the percent, just grab your current health, grab your maximum health, convert both of them to floats, and then divide your current health by the maximum health. That's your percentage. Then we need to update our health text too, so set text. And like we set up the default value of that, we always wanted to read the current value, white space, then that separator here, another white space, and then the maximum value. So for that, we will use a format text node. And in here, we will enter the curly brackets. In there, type in current. After that, one white space, separator, another white space, and then in another curly bracket pair, max. To fill out these inputs, just grab your current health and convert that to text. Make sure use grouping is not checked. Copy that node and plug in maximum health and then hook both of them up to the format text node. Alright, that's it for our update health function. We also need one to set the state, and that needs one input of the type e_building state. You can just call that new state. Then we will set our state variable to the input here. And to implement that visual effect from Fortnite, just grab your health bar and set fill color and opacity. we want to choose a different one based on the state. So grab your state, look for a select node, hook up the return value to the in color. Now we can select colors for building and build. So while we are building, that will be orange. Again, I'll use the hex linear code that you can find in the video description if you want to get the exact same result. And that will be 864803FF. And for build, we will use a saturated green color. The code I will use here is 23A518FF. Hit OK. Compile and save this. Then we can close our two functions, and in our event graph, let's add one custom event called initialize bar. Give that one input. We already are able to update our current health with the update health function and the state. So what is left is our maximum health. Call that input max health. Make it an int. Then we will set maximum health to the input. After that, set state to building and update health with the new value being 0. Alright, compile and save, and that's it for our building health bar. However, currently our building class doesn't even have any stat values. We could just make that integer values in the master building, but we already created our stats manager that we are also using for the player. So let's use that concept and go to buildings, classes, then right click your master stat manager, create child blueprint class and call that BPC underscore building stats. Alright, double click, open that up. If we have a look at our class defaults, we've got the stats map here. Let's add one element to it because all of our buildings only use the health. And let's set minimum and current to 0. And the maximum will be derived by other values anyway, so no need to change that. But what we need in here is a helper function called getMaxHealth, because we'll need to access that many times. So a function is always good for that. Give that one output of type int, just call it out or max value, whatever you want. And it's a pure function, only returns something, so pure. Then call getStat. Stat will be health. Break your stat value structure and hook up the max value. Simple as that. Compile and save. Now what is very special for the buildings is that we also have to set the maximum value, because that may change based on what resource was used for building. And we didn't implement that functionality in our parent class yet. So let's do it here. Set max stat value. That will need 3 inputs. So first one will be the stat. So an e underscore stats. Just call that stat. Then the second one will be an integer called new value. And the third one will be a boolean called update question mark. Before we do anything in here, let's promote all of these inputs to local variables. So local stat, local value, and finally local update. Then set them. After that, let's look for our stats map and get its keys, because we want to see whether that array here contains the local stat. And the next condition will be that our local stat is not equal enum to our empty stat, the slash here, right? Hook that up to the end. Then we can hold B and left click to add a branch. Hook that up to the condition and hook up the execution. If it's false, means our input is invalid, so we can't do something. Return. If it's true, however, let's copy over our stats. And you might remember that to update a value, you will need to call the add function in here. Then it will be asking you for a stat, so that will be our local stat. And the stat value structure here. And off of it, we will make s underscore stat value. So now we can enter minimum, current, and max value. Let's get stat and hook up our local stat. Then break the stat value here. So our minimum value will stay the same. So that just comes from right here. Our maximum value will be the local value, so one of our inputs. And for the current value, we can grab our current value from the getStat and clamp that so to make sure that it's in between our minimum value and our new maximum value, so the local value. Then hook that up to the current value. And the last thing we'll do is add another branch to check our local update boolean. If it's true, we can call update stat and hook up the local stat. After that, return. and copy paste that node for the false path. Compile and save this. We can close our two functions. And in our event graph, we will add one custom event to initialize this manager. And because that component should only be used on building actors, we'll give it an input of the type master building object reference. Just call that building. So what building this manager is used for. And let's check whether that is valid, because only then we can promote that to a variable. Call it building or building reference. And after setting that variable, we can call setup stats. Compile and save. We will minimize our building stats for now and return later, because there's one function to override that we're still missing, which is the update stat. Can't do that right now, so let's minimize it. And we actually want to see our health bar widget that we created. And like the build widget that is attached to the master building. So go in there. And then we'll add a component, which will be a widget component. And let's call that the health bar. Drag that onto your default scene root. The space will be screen, like with our build widget. Widget class will be w_building health bar. Draw size is just the size of our widget, which were 360 by 32 pixel. Then let's scroll down, and we will also set the visibility to false by default, because only when we actually decide to place a building we want to show that. Currently the health bar is in the lower left corner of your building, so let's fix that by setting location in X to 200 and in Z to 202. Then we also want to add our newly created building stats manager. So look for building stats and add that. And the one default value with health is fine. Compile and let's go to the event graph. Event begin play. Here we're getting the user widget of a build widget and setting that to a reference. So let's do the same thing for our health bar. Drag in your health bar. Get user widget object and cast that to the building health bar. If that cast is successful, you can also promote that to a variable. Let's call that health bar ref. Then after we did that, we can call the update. And before we set the visibility of a build widget, let's also grab our building stats and initialize it. It'll be asking you for the building, which will simply be self. Let's set up the functionality to place a building now. So first off, we need a variable in here called build ? Simple boolean should do. And another one called in player side ? We won't need that one in this episode, but in the next one. Make sure to compile, save, and then set the default value of in player side to true. Because only if our player sees a building, we want to update its health and display that. Before we implement the event to build it, let's see what is actually done in Fortnite. So when you're in construction mode and hitting your left mouse button on a PC, you are placing the building. So its position is no longer updated. Then the collision of the mesh is enabled. We see that the material of the mesh is updated to match the one of the selected resource. And you no longer see the build widget, but instead see the health bar with slowly increasing health. So let's code all of that here. We will add a simple custom event, call that onBuild, and give it one input of the master resource class, which will just be the resource used for building. First want to check whether that input here is valid, then add a branch for that. We will only proceed if that's true. Then we can set build to true. We want to enable the collision of a building mesh, so grab it and set collision response to all channels to block. Then we want to apply the correct material, so off of your building mesh, set material, element index 0 is fine. And let's grab that material, so off of our resource, get class defaults, break the resource data, and hook up the building material. Then we can hide unconnected pins. I mentioned that the build widget will no longer be visible, so what we can do is just destroy that component. It's no longer needed. Then we will get our building stats and set maximum stat value of health, and the new value depends on what resource was used. So drag in your resource versions, and then we will find the input class, break that output, and hook up the maximum health to the new value. Update will be left as false. After that, let's also set stat, so the current value of health, to 0, and also uncheck update. Can't update it yet because we haven't initialized the bar yet. Then let's grab our building time here and promote that to a variable. Just call it building time and set it. Then we will get the health bar reference, not your component, the reference, and initialize bar. To grab the max health off of your building stats, just get max health. That's why we created that helper function. And now after having set up everything for the health bar reference, we can get the health bar component and set visibility to true, so show it. Before we proceed, let's create 2 custom events. So the first one will be the building tick, copy paste it, and the second one will be on building end, just so we've got them created already. Because after we set the visibility, we want to set a timer by event. Because what we have to do now is to slowly add health to our building until it reaches the maximum health. And you can see in Fortnite that after a couple of seconds it always adds a certain amount of health. For us that means that neither a timeline nor a linear interpolation is used, probably using a timer with a defined interval. And the event here will be the building tick. We'll make it looping, promote the time to a variable. Let's just call that interval. If we compile and save, we can set the default value of that. I figured out that 0.25 seconds works pretty fine. So in 1 second, we will see 4 chunks of health that are added to a building. Grab the return value and promote that to a variable. Call it building timer handle. And after that timer is finished, we basically want to call on building end. So grab a delay node. And the time we have to wait is our building time plus the interval. Hook that up to the duration, and after that call on building end. Let's do on building end before we do the tick. That's very simple. We just get our building timer handle and then check whether that is valid. Add a branch for it. If it's true, we can grab our building timer and stop that. So clear and invalidate timer by handle. And after that, get your health bar reference and set state to build, so that the color of a health bar changes to green. Then let's handle the building tick. So we already know that we've got to get our building stats and then modify a stat. We want to affect the health, and let's figure out what that by is. We will add a little bit of math here because that will depend on our interval, the building time, and maximum health. So first off, for your building stats, get max health. So that is the value that we've got to reach. Convert that to a float. And then we will divide it by something, by another float. And now to get that, we grab the building time, then divide that by our interval. So the result of that is how many times our timer will tick over the course of the building time. Let's floor that, which basically means rounding it to the largest previous integer. So for example, 4.6 will be 4 when you use the floor node. Then let's convert that to a float, to float int, plug that in for the division here. And then we have to add one other function here, which is called fceal. So basically rounding to the smallest following integer, so 4.1 would be 5 in this case. And we just do that to make sure that we will always reach at least the maximum health and not some value below that. Plug that in for the by. Because of that math here, it could actually be that we reach the maximum health before that delay and on building end here triggers. So let's just simply add a branch and let's get a stat of our building stats. We will get our health and check whether the current value equals get max health. Plug it in for the condition, and if it's true, it means we can stop our timer, so call on building end. Compile, save, and that's everything in here for this episode, so close it. We will return to our building stat. I already mentioned there's one function to override, which is update stat. Let's add another check, so a branch here. Basically, we know that for our buildings we are only using health and not shield. So let's check that that stat equals health. And the second condition will be that our building is in player's side. Otherwise that would be a waste of performance if we just update the stat even though we cannot see the health bar. We will worry more about setting that value here in the next episode. Currently the default of that is set to true, which you can see here. Hook that up to the end and to the condition. And if it's true, it's very simple. We will get the building, get the health bar ref, and call update health. Then to grab the new value, we will just get stat and here select health. Then we can connect the current value. Compile, save, close your building stats. We implemented all of the functionality in a master building that will handle the building process. However, we also have to start that process from our building manager. So let's go in there. And here let's add a custom event. Let's call that place current building. There are a couple of things that we have to do in here. But before we do that, let's check whether the current building is valid. If it isn't, there's nothing to place. Then after that, we have to check whether we've got enough resources to build it. Fortunately, we've got a function for that we made in the last episode, can build building, and off of the out, add an if statement or a branch. Hook that up to the is valid. And if that is true, we already know that we will be able to place that building. But before that, let's grab our player character, then grab the player resources, BPC player resources, and we will remove resource. And now it comes in handy that we created two other outputs for our can build building function, so we can just hook up the resource and the amount. After that, we no longer want to update the position of that building, so grab your building timer handle and clear and invalidate that. Then get your current building and we will call the onBuild event. To get the resource, we can just hook that up from our can build building function. After that, we will call our start building event. So that will handle spawning the next preview mesh. All right, part and save. All of the functionality is there now. Only thing missing is to hook it up to a key event. In our case, the left mouse button. We will do that in a third person character. Just right here, let's look for left mouse button. The left mouse button in Fortnite is also used for an attack move, so we can't simply execute logic here. We've got to get our state and switch on that. And only if we're in construction, we can get our building manager and try to place current building. Hook that up to construction, compile, save, and that should be it. So let's see whether that's working. All right, now I'm hitting Q to go into building mode and we can see our floor. Currently, if I hit the left mouse button, nothing will happen because we haven't got enough resources. So let's add some. And now if I hit the left mouse button, that will be built. You're also seeing the health bar of it updating. Let's select another resource. That's also working. Finally, metal, also working fine. And you can actually see that all of the values we set up for the different resource version affect the maximum health, building time, and so on. Let's do the wall now. That should take a little bit longer to set up. And you actually see that the health bar is orange when it's building and green when that process is completed. All right, we see that everything works. However, there are two issues currently. The first one is that all of the health bars are visible at the same time, and we only want to show those that our player could actually see. And the other issue is that we could place buildings on top of each other. So if I place a wall here, I could just place another one, and another one. So we will hopefully deal with all of these issues in the next video. See you then.